Hi, everyone. Good morning. Okay, let's hope this works. It's a few minutes of suspense. Yeah, we like to live on the edge. Uh, okay, well, as they say, it's a pleasure, blah, blah, blah. It is really a pleasure. This is my second time I think on stage, but I also helped organizing another event of yours. Which I know is always a great moment. And last night I was talking with few of us, for few of you, and this person said, "Well, this year unfortunately the room is pretty small." Wow, if this is a small room, I don't know what you're used to. But I'm really fascinated by what you guys do, and I'm really meaning what I'm saying. And of course the computer is not working. I can talk forever, anyways. Oh yes, no, sorry, it's not. And I was actually talking at the table with Chris. I asked him, "Can you repeat it? How much money did they raise? 500,000. This is amazing." And I always say that your activities are really inspiring, particularly this section of the southwestern Ontario. I've seen a similar amount of activity in another association in BC, where I've been a couple of times. Even there is very nice. Not so much in Toronto, but Toronto is always a little bit like that. They think they're special, right? But indeed, you are special. Uh, I don't know if I can go. Is the presentation showing? Something has happened to, because before they were blaming my computer, but now I guess this is not my computer anymore. Uh, so I can go on without slides if you want, but it would be nice because today I have a few videos to show. Well, in the meantime, let me sing a song. No. In the meantime, I also want to say that I'm really pleased to have met new people in this few hours I've been around, and also some people I know very well. They're here in the audience. Uh, and yeah, it feels like a family in the end. And while waiting for the computer to work, let me tell you what I'm going to show, hopefully, today. I was asked to talk about the new treatments from a symptomatic standpoint. As you heard before, Parkinson's, unfortunately, is a chronic condition, at least for so far. And even if one day we'll have a cure, we should not forget about people that have the disease. And most likely, a cure won't be helping people who have been dealing with the problem for years. So this is important because we need to still work a lot on symptomatic treatments, which is not less important actually than finding a cure. And I will argue that finding a cure is actually distracting to some extent the money. If you go to the Michael J. Fox Foundation website, obviously their motto is "We'll be here until Parkinson's isn't," which is great. But at the same time, a lot of funding, a lot of the money that is raised for research goes into finding a cure because it's what people want, and a lot of the money doesn't go to finding better ways to deliver levodopa or pumps or deep brain stimulation devices with a better technology. So today I'll walk you through a few things, and and I'm laughing because the computer is restarting, so that's never a good sign, right? But I don't want to waste time, so let's get started. And then I'll show you a few videos here and there of what I'm going to tell you. So what's new in Parkinson's disease from a symptomatic standpoint? And I was asked to talk particularly about advanced Parkinson's disease or complicated Parkinson's disease. So let me say that I don't like advanced, I don't like complicated. These are not nice terms. And if I were a patient, I would not like my doctor to tell me, "Oh, you have advanced Parkinson's disease," right? I'd rather talk about Parkinson's disease requiring advanced treatments. And that has a lot of if you look at the words, it's much different, and it's sounding much better because indeed it is what it is. We're using technology for most part to help Parkinson's, and at the moment when we look at technology to help Parkinson's, I need to tell you about a couple of things, and in particular I will discuss the new things. Deep brain stimulation, you know about it, and I won't talk too much about what's deep brain stimulation, but I'll hopefully show a few new things. Second, focused ultrasound. Have you heard about focused ultrasound? Yeah. So, and I just show a few things because if you don't talk about focused ultrasound, eventually there's a question about it. So it's better to talk about it. And then I'll talk about the pumps that you have available in Canada. The pumps are duodopa, which is an intestinal infusion of a gel containing levodopa, and the newest pump that is called Vialef, which is subcutaneous phospholevodopa. This is the newest one. It is the new treatment that everybody's excited about. And as you will see, and also maybe through discussion and questions, I want to put things in context because it's not just about what's new is best. Like anything new, there are problems sometimes. And I want you to be aware that like anything, there are pros and cons so that you can have a better sense of what I'm going to talk about. Why is it important to talk about these things to people living with Parkinson's? Because you are really the subject in this space. You are no longer the object of what doctors do. I have regular conversation with my patients about what's best for them, and it's a team effort. Some of you in the room are indeed patients of mine, and you can tell that, especially before starting something more advanced, we sat down and we went over the options. And actually, there's a moment in doing this where I say, well, now more than a doctor, I look like a car dealer because I'm going to tell you the different models, different makes. Some comes with a tool, some other with another tool. Same thing, because it's like going for shopping, and you need to know what the options are. And obviously, when I talk to you guys about the options, I know in my mind what's best for you. My personal opinion, though. But my opinion might be biased. To give you an example, once I met this guy, was younger than me, with Parkinson's tremor, and I thought that for him the best option would have been DBS, because with DBS you can adjust settings, and if you have a complications, that complication might stay for many years. So you want to do something that is a bit more reversible in a younger person. And then he said, no, I'm here for focused ultrasound, which is introducing a lesion through ultrasound without opening the skull. And I didn't understand why. And then he looked at me and said, look, doctor, I have your same haircut. So he was a bald man like myself. And I work in a casino in Niagara. And since I'm the card dealer, I don't want people to think I have some sort of chip in my head that is used. And this is actually just an example of many others that I can tell you how important. Wow. How important. But I could have gone on and on for hours without slides. Don't worry. Okay, so let's. Actually, the story that is the story, and it's about the values. Everybody has different values. So let me go quickly about. I don't want to spend more time because I already wasted time because of the problems with my computer. So I want to show you this guy here. So this is Harry Forrestal. Have you heard about him? He's the news guy in New Brunswick, CBC. He's been very public and vocal about his Parkinson's disease. He's underwent DBS, he's a patient of mine. And I've been very fascinated by how he's been open about what he's had, and is really an advocate, like many of you are. But what's special about him is that because he's a journalist, what he said, also his articles, were really seen and read by many people, including Michael J. Fox himself, who called him. As you know, Michael J. Fox is Canadian. He called him, said, hey, I want you to come to New York and interview me. So if you go on YouTube and you type Harry Forrestal, Michael J. Fox, you can actually see the interview of Harry interviewing Michael, and it's really, really touching. But the reason I'm talking about Harry is also because, and actually this was one of the events in Toronto where we were presenting together. Harry has a new type of DBS device that is allowing us to sense the brain, and these lines you see on screen is brain activity in the left and in the right brain, I don't want to get into the technical aspects. This is just to say that now we're filling that gap between the patient and the doctor, in a sense that the patient is at home for months before get to see me. And I know it's always too late when you see me. Oh, doctor, you made me wait months. So we're trying to really understand what's going on in people's life when they are not with us, obviously without invading privacy too much. But this is just to give you an example. See, you can see my cursor, right? You see it or not when I move it? You probably don't. At the bottom, you see when there is right STN, there are those flat lines. This is how much Parkinson's the person has in that particular moment. This was August 26th. And as you can see, between midnight and 8 or 9 in the morning, the line is pretty flat. And this is because, as we know, when you sleep, Parkinson's goes away. And indeed, in the brain, there's not much Parkinson's. And we can actually see if you're sleeping, how long you're sleeping, if you have a good night's sleep, if you're having nightmares. So these are many things that we can actually see on a day-to-day basis. This is a sort of brain diary. Harry came with me to Copenhagen for a meeting, and we were on stage together. And this is his flight. He flew in business class, actually. But do you think he slept that night or during the flight? So this is the night before, and this is when he was on the plane. And he didn't sleep at all, right? So this is just to give you a sense. You can compare, right? Especially on the left side of the graph. This is just to say that we are learning a lot more about what happens on a day-to-day basis. But sensing from inside the brain is also very preliminary to something new and cool that is about to happen, that is adaptive deep brain stimulation. Have you heard about it? Closed loop deep brain stimulation. So this is a stimulation that senses what's going on in the brain and responds to it. And this guy here, Benjamin, I don't know if you ever heard of him. If you haven't, go to his website and blog. It's called Tomorrow Edition. Benjamin is 5-6 years younger than me, and he's had the disease for about 12 years now. And when he got diagnosed, he didn't give up, and he traveled the world, and he met all the most influential researchers, and eventually decided I was going to be his neurologist, which is actually something that makes me very proud. And together we wrote a book. The book is called Reprogramming the Brain, because Ben has been the first Canadian patient to have adaptive deep brain stimulation, so a stimulation that responds to the brain and adjusts. But now I want to show you another person. This is a very dear person to me. And by the way, as you can see, I use patient, people living with Parkinson's. I know that to some people, patient is a little offensive nowadays. To me, it's not, because when I go to the doctor, I'm a patient myself, and patient comes actually from a Latin word that has a lot of meaning, and if you want, we can talk more about it. But anyways, this person, this patient, as you want to call it, is a dear friend of mine. I've known him before he developed Parkinson's. His name is Fabio, and Fabio is a guitar player, but he could not play the guitar. We actually used to play in the same band together. And we use this DBS technology that I was just introducing to understand how to stimulate his brain. And this was him a week later. And now what Fabio is doing is something I always tell you guys. Yes, you're doing better now, but don't just relax now. This is the time for you to exercise, to take advantage of the improvement. Because if you stay home and watch Netflix all day, you know what? In a year from now, you're going to be back to square one. So he improved, and he started practicing really for hours, day by day.
7/9 chords.
And this is him playing with his band, and he's back on stage now. And it's not just that, he is another advocate. This was him in Brazil. He's Brazilian, actually. He was invited to a conference, and he opened the conference. And this obviously makes me very proud, because he's my friend, but he's also an advocate now. And it's not just about DBS or guitar player or tremor. It's about resilience, right? It's a term that we use too much during COVID, but I think we can use it every once in a while now. So with Fabio, I was on stage a few days ago. We were in Minneapolis. And what you see above him is his brain recording. So we are doing recording of his brain live. And you can see that this line is like the matrix, is coming. And this is his subthalamus that is firing at a certain frequency. And now I ask him to play the guitar, to try to play the guitar. As you can see on the right, the stimulation is at 0 milliampere, meaning there is no stimulation going on. And he cannot play. And if you see up, in the screen, now you'll see that there's a spike of activity, which is his neurons that are causing the tremor while he's trying to play. You see? It's going up now. And now you will see that I little by little increase the stimulation. And I wish I had my computer because I could go a little faster and move a little bit the presentation. But I guess you will see little by little that as I increase the stimulation on the right, people with DBS know that this is happens all the time. So you see, and now it's starting to slowly increase 0.3, 0.4, 0.5. And you will see that the tremor, not just in Fabio's hand, but also in the brain itself, changes. You see that the line is no longer spiking up, but is staying down. And little by little, you see that the tremor improves and he can play the guitar. So Fabio is a dear person to me also for another reason. When I met him, I thought about all the other people with Parkinson's that I follow who are professional musicians. And I always had this dream to put them together and do something about Parkinson's with a song. I don't know if you know Martha Johnson or Martha and the Muffins. I should admit that before coming to Canada, I didn't know Martha and the Muffins, but I know in Canada they are pretty big. But please don't tell Martha I said this. And I put together Martha and Fabio, and I said, you guys need to do something. You need to write a song. I won't tell you what to do and how to do because you are the professional, but I want this song to be a testament of the fact that in life, we don't always have to move fast. We are used to this society that is going so fast, but in reality, if we walk slower, if we reflect, if we pause before talking, things might be a little better. And so meanwhile, you can see the tremor of Fabio has improved. But this is Fabio and Martha the night I introduced them. We were in a pub in Toronto. And this is the beginning of this song that is being called Slow Emotion. And if you haven't heard about it, go on Spotify, go on YouTube. I want to show you a little clip because with Slow Emotion, there is also a documentary that came out. And now we're hopefully being featured in some of the stock festivals. And this is the documentary, just a snapshot.
I'm waiting for the sun to rise so I can see that look in your eye. Empathy, not sympathy, that's where we want to be. Take it slow, and then you'll know how to be kind, how to free your mind. That's where we wanna be. I'm living in slow emotion now. I'm living in slow.
So this is the song. Have a listen. Few more things about DBS and then we'll move on. Remote programming. I don't know if you know that, but after DBS, there is additional appointments needed to adjust the DBS device. And this is a big problem in terms of access to care. Because people living far from big cities usually are not offered the treatment because they cannot come back and forth. But now we can program patients using the internet with certain devices. The patient is at home, I'm in my office sipping a coffee, and I'm adjusting the settings. And this is so futuristic and to some extent also dangerous if you think about it. But technology has been safe enough, hopefully no Russian hackers, but I should say they really did a lot of work because this is technology that got developed during COVID. And COVID was actually a big push towards remote care. This is the map of patients that we've been treating with this technology. And this particular gentleman up here on the right lives in Newfoundland, and he doesn't have to fly 4 hours anymore to come see me. This woman at the bottom here, she's Canadian, but she lives in Trinidad and Tobago, and she doesn't want to invite me to join her for the programming, and so I do it from my office. And this is just to give you an idea of how it works. So we can program the patient remotely, and we came up with this idea of assessing their tremor, asking them to hold the phone. So the phone that we use to talk to them is also the one that communicates with the DBS device. And this woman has a right tremor. So I ask her to keep the phone on her hand with the right hand that is the one shaking, so that I can see her face. And I can see that until her face shakes, it means that the tremor is still there. And at some point, adjusting the settings, the tremor goes away. So I'll skip this because we are late, but I want to say a few words, as I said before, about focused ultrasound. This is a procedure where the person needs to be fully shaved. As my surgeon jokes, he always says, I'm ready to go whenever I want focused ultrasound. But you guys, in case you want, and this is something that many people don't like, you need to be shaved because this is the best way for the ultrasound to reach the inside of the brain without interference from other sources. The head is in a special helmet with water that is going around to keep the skin cool. And these ultrasound are all focused in a particular part of the brain, which is basically cooked. I always say this is like a very expensive microwave. But it's $1 million actually, I think I need to stop doing this because now I'm getting requests to have the guided microwave therapy for my patients. So, but this is just to give you an idea of how it works. This is a Parkinson's patient with tremor, and this is a week later. So there's no need for programming. This works very well for tremor, usually on one side only of the body, but bear in mind that this is still a surgical treatment because people think it's not surgical, number one. Number two, it's usually done on one side. Number three, it doesn't really help slowness, dyskinesias, rigidity. It's mainly for tremor. There are ways to help rigidity and dyskinesias, but it's not really the greatest. Now let's talk about pumps. I told you about duodopa. That is something you know pretty well. There is not much new to report. It's working well, but we were the first in the world to publish about the use of duodopa in outpatients, meaning that there is no reason for the person to be admitted to hospital. You come to see us, we do everything as an outpatient, inserting the G-tube, programming the pump. You don't need to be in hospital. And when we published this 10 years ago, we weren't really sure if this was going to be safe. We now know it is safe. 10 years later, these are the new data. If you look at this line here, these are the people that are on the pump, that if the line goes down, this is called survival table. If the lines goes down, it means that people have discontinued the pump. And as you can see, very little a very small percentage of people have stopped the pump over the 10 years. Of course, some people have stopped the pump because unfortunately they died, and a lot of them actually died from COVID, which is another big issue. But thankfully, it's no longer the case. And in terms of side effects, not much to talk about. So I mentioned DBS, there are different targets. I mentioned focused ultrasound, which is a type of ablation because we lesion the brain. I mentioned duodopa, which is levodopa, carbidopa, intestinal gel, or LCGI. And then you see CSAI. You don't have it in Canada. It's apomorphine pump. But now there is a new option that is subcutaneous false levodopa. Now you see these X's and check marks. This is complicated, but in short, what the neurologist does is obviously assessing the person in front of them and look at different features. On the left, you see certain features, rest tremor, need to age or caregiver present or not. And by the way, without caregivers or care partners, we won't be able to do anything. I always say that my job is like a flight attendant in a way, because I don't know if you notice, when you board a plane, the flight attendant is at the door greeting you. They've been trained to recognize if you are under the effect of substance, if you're a good ally in case of a problem on the plane, if you're a troublemaker. They are really good at judging you from just a hi, welcome on board. Doctor, when assesses the patient, assesses the family too. And now, I can tell you there are people that come to my office with a very supportive partner, sometimes too much, the type of partner taking notes of everything you say, asking 10,000 questions. And that's also a problem sometimes. But it's better than the other type of partner that I've seen, that is the partner showing up in the room and opening the newspaper and not giving a damn about what's happening in the room. All other story are the Italian families. It's 10, 12 of them in the room, and nobody knows what's going on. They just come to see the show. And then there are other people that instead come alone, unfortunately. They say, well, are you married? Yeah, my husband is in the waiting room, or my wife went to, she likes to go for shopping when she's in Toronto. So those are bad signs. You remember the flight attendant kind of analogy? I judge often more the caregiver than the person living with the problem, because we need them, because with technology, you cannot really go far if there's someone at home that helps with the pump, with the needle, the programming of DBS. So this is one of the many criteria that we look into. But so as you can tell, DBS sometimes is difficult to offer. You see how many X's there are. The easiest for sure is phospholevodopa subcutaneously because it's not a real intervention. It's a pump with a cannula under the skin. So in this particular example, I just for fun, I looked at how many X's there are, how many no's there are in this criteria. And as you can see, the easiest to offer are focused ultrasound, the phospholevodopa pump, then the duodopa pump, and then DBS. DBS really it's a lot of work for patients and family. So let's talk about a little bit about subcutaneous phospholevodopa. And I want to say that it is exciting time. It's a new treatment. A lot of people are interested in it. We have a wait time right now of few months already. We have 60 patients at the moment waiting to have this. It is also a proud Canadian moment because we got this treatment approved a year almost before the States, because the States always they get treatments earlier, as you think about, if you think about it, which is a big problem. Also because inflates often the expectations. There are a lot of people thinking that in the States there's better healthcare, better treatments, but at the end of the day, you guys don't miss much. And in fact, in situations like phospholevodopa, you got it before your American counterpart. So phospholevodopa is just another way to give levodopa. Why phospholevodopa? Because it's a modified version of levodopa. Because if you have a phosphate formulation of levodopa, you can have a lot more of levodopa in a small volume of water. That's why it's phospholevodopa. But in the body, it becomes levodopa right away. And by the way, levodopa also becomes dopamine when it gets into the brain. The one thing that I want to say is that with this treatment, you can actually receive up to 4,000 and more milligrams of levodopa, which is 40 tablets of Cinemet or Levocarb 100. And as you can tell, it's a lot, right? I'm not saying you need to be on so much levodopa, but this is to say that this is a treatment that in theory is tailored for monotherapy. You ideally stop all the medications when you are on this treatment. Maybe slowly, but you can be on the pump only, and the pump is meant to last 24 hours. So it's a continuous infusion, which is good for the night. You know that Parkinson doesn't go to bed, unfortunately, and it can keep you awake at night. But if you are treated at night, you sleep better. You don't have restless leg syndrome, you don't have dystonia, you don't have pain, you don't have urinary frequency. And that's usually what the brain needs, dopamine. You don't have to have a sleeping pill or a medication for your prostate. You know, sometimes you just need to have treatment that lasts 24 hours. But this comes with some problems because the brain is more frail at night. So some people actually have hallucinations in the middle of the night because they are on the treatment for 24 hours, which introduces an issue, and sometimes we need to use a low dose at night, which comes with another problem I'll show you in a second. But how does it work? Well, the patient has at home these vials. The vials can be kept in the fridge, but they can also be out for 28 days max. And there's a whole process using a syringe and this adapter here, where you are supposed to take the phospholevodopa in a syringe, and this syringe is the one that is going to be hosted in the pump itself. It is a very important process, and once again, education is key, because if you don't do it right, you cause skin irritation, because you need to be careful, because you can contaminate the solution, the needle, the syringe, and that can cause an infection. Then there is this cannula, which is like a needle, but it's not a needle actually. It's a piece of plastic that is inserted with this special injector here, which is basically a spring-mounted system that, with a spring, indeed very fast, introduce the cannula using a piece of metal that doesn't stay in your skin though. So in the end, what's left in your skin is a little piece of plastic, and it's not really painful. This is supposed to be changed every 3 days. Sometimes you need to do it earlier. So remember, it lasts 24 hours. Depending on how much levodopa you use, you might need to use 1-2 syringes a day. So that might need to do some adjustment. That syringe contains less than 2,000 milligrams of levodopa. So most people can do with one syringe. And the cannula is to be changed every 3 days. This is the pump. The pump could have been better, if I may say, because it's still a bit bigger than I thought. It's smaller than the Duodopa pump, but it's bigger. And AbbVie is the producer, says that they're working on a smaller version. And if you think about technologies working towards smaller and smaller and smaller, right? If you compare the very first phones we used to have in our pockets to what we had later, although now with Apple Max, everything is much bigger anyways, but still. Uh, so this is the pump. I want to show you, this is the very first patient that we treated in April. And this man is extremely grateful that he got the treatment. And in fact, I should say that the major proof that he's happy with the treatment is that he's paying out of pocket for it because he didn't have coverage. And out of pocket is $1,000 a week, right? Um, Thankfully, you don't have to worry about it. Again, you are not in the States, and you pay taxes, I hope, and that's why you get this treatment for free now, because it's being covered by OHIP. But this is what you see on the right is the same man a month later, and this is just to say that having something in the skin that injects something 24 hours a day comes with some problems, like a little bit of irritation, maybe a little infection, but for most part, these are minor issues. Now I want you to hear from a patient of ours who transitioned from duodopa to false levodopa. And I didn't get the G-tube out right away because you never know. Maybe he doesn't like it. Maybe he doesn't manage the pump well, or maybe the skin doesn't like the cannula. So I usually, in these cases, I keep the G-tube in for a month, and we go on the pump, on the false levodopa pump to see which one is best. Okay, let's hear from him. Changing from duodopa to subcutaneous false levodopa, violet.
Yeah.
How long ago was that?
It's about a month ago.
Okay, so tell me what has changed.
What have changed? A few things stands out, which is like I have problem the overnight sleeping, but that Duodopa did quite a lot of work to clear it up, set the tone for it, and then even now we switch over and it's doing even better.
So night is better.
Right. And then the second thing is I used to have a little king in the back of the neck, couldn't turn back, and then I couldn't drink the water from the cup, close to the bottom. Now I could put it like this.
So your neck. So what he's talking about is probably the effect of a continuous infusion, because duodopa is technically used for 16 hours a day. Some people use duodopa for the night too, but this false levodopa for 24 hours might have a different effect on the disease itself, because the brain is supposed to be stimulated with dopamine all day and night long. So some people don't only see an improvement of the sleep quality, for reason I mentioned before, but also of the neck posture. Some people also freezing of gait, although this is more difficult to predict. So this is the man when he switched from duodopa to false levodopa. See, this is the false levodopa pump, and he still has the G-tube in place. And this is a picture of his belly a few days ago. He doesn't have the G-tube anymore. You see that there's a second belly button up here. But again, this is to show you that the skin has some, bruises and things like this. This is just to say that, unfortunately, this is something that happens, and some people like it, don't mind too much, but some others don't like it. And actually, studies have shown that people, after a few months, stop the treatment because of it. So this is another customer. Let's see what he has to say. And tell me about your morning. What happens in the morning when you wake up?
So I do get a bit of dystonia and so on in the morning. So it could take me anywhere from an hour to sometimes a couple hours to get to my clear on state.
So it takes up to 2 hours to be fully on.
Yeah.
And do you give yourself an extra dose?
Yeah, I give myself an extra dose.
Which is at 0.3 now,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Which is the highest. And do you feel the benefit of the extra dose?
Initially, it gets worse before it gets better. So it does help me sleep at night. But then the transition in the morning is a challenge for sure. Just the size of the pump. Obviously it's all right when you sleep, but if you're someone that wants to play golf, play basketball, do all these things, you don't want to be taking the pump off multiple times a day.
Yeah, so the issue of the pump being disconnected, you can actually disconnect the pump for maximum an hour. So you can just disconnect and then reconnect without problems. But if it's more than an hour, then you need to prime again everything from with a loading dose and so forth. So, but he's also talking about the morning. Most people have a better morning because they are constantly treated. But remember, I told you that the brain is more sensitive at night. So what we end up doing is using a lower dose in the middle of the night. and then we give them the usual dose in the morning. But transitioning from the low dose to high dose might take some time, and people might feel slow. There is the opportunity to give you a boost dose, an extra dose, but sometimes that is not enough. So in some of our patients, we actually tell them to take a tablet of Cinemet in the morning when they get up. This is something that fresh off the print. We just published this, and this is complicated, but there is signal looking at the publications. This is a meta-analysis. I don't know if you've ever seen this type of pictures. It's called meta-analysis, which means putting together the results of trials. So one trial shows something, another trial shows something else, and then there's a person like Dr. Fasano that at some point say, okay, let's sum up. Let's see if you combine all the patients involved in the trials, let's see what happens. And this is sometimes useful for events that are not very frequent, like falling. And what we've seen in this meta-analysis is that treatments like deep brain stimulation increase actually the number of falls for a complicated reason, number of reasons. Instead, subcutaneous levodopa or false levodopa reduces the number of falls. So this is probably because people are less off during the day, and as we know, when you're off, your balance is worse. But at the same time, the procedure itself doesn't touch your brain, doesn't have the potential to make your balance worse. So that's something that we'll work on in the future for sure. There are a few other issues that I would like to discuss about BioLife. In particular, the fact that people are sleeping or even having a sexual life with a pump, right? And I'm talking about the sexual life not because I'm Italian, but because this is important in general to people's health, mental health, any type of health. But I should say that the pump itself doesn't really affect people's life too much. There is not much done in the space of Parkinson's, but a lot of studies have been done in people with insulin pumps. Because these are even younger individuals often, and people have looked into how the pump affects the quality of their night, and in the end, it's pros and cons. And because people get so much better because of the pump, that for sure outweighs the problem of having a pump attached to you all the time. So how many people can get these treatments? So we did a small experiment in our clinic. We looked at all the people that entered the door in 2018 for a few months. And we determined that about 30% of people with Parkinson's showing up at Toronto Western, not just in my clinic, because my clinic has a biased referral rate, because all the people coming to see me usually are ready for these treatments. But if you look at all Parkinson's disease patients coming in, we determined that about 30% of people are eligible for the pump treatment, and a little less, around 18%, are eligible for deep brain stimulation. Now, if you look at the number of people getting these treatments, actually this is very, very lower than, much lower than what I just said. It's not 30% of the population for sure. And that has a lot to do with fear of having surgical treatment, but also with, unfortunately, disparities in the society. Canada is pretty good in this regard, but in the States, for example, the classic person getting one of these treatments is the white, wealthy man, old man. Minorities don't get these treatments. Women don't get these treatments. So more needs to be done. Like I said, we are in a much better position, but still, there's room for improvement for sure. So, and this actually has been studied in several studies. This is one of them, one of the most recent. They looked at the 45% of people that were offered at one of these treatments that didn't include the subcutaneous false levodopa because it wasn't available back then. And they noticed that of this group of people, 45% are offered the treatment, only 15% ended up receiving it. And there's a 22% they didn't want to have it. And then when they looked into why they didn't want to have it, see, the most common scenarios that people need more time to decide, which is understandable. Some other feels it's not necessary, but many others are afraid, basically. And this introduces me to my last part of the talk. I know you think it's going to last forever, this talk, but we're almost done. And this is the new wave of treatment of Parkinson's disease. I don't know if you've seen these pictures before. This is published in one of the most prestigious journals in neurology, the Lancet Neurology. And this is by a dear friend of mine, Buzz Bloom, where basically they're putting the patient at the center of this galaxy as a sort of a star, with all these other healthcare professionals orbiting around, from a neurology, neurosurgeon, dietitian, nutritionist, physiotherapist, you name it. All of the healthcare providers are around the person living with the disease, which is great. And in principle, I agree with it. But I will also argue that sometimes people living with the disease have behavioral problems. They have dementia, and they might not be the one driving the process. So it's a really a team effort. I think it's the care provider. I think the neurologist in particular, and the person living with the problem and the caregiver together with all the other people, including the neurosurgeon in the periphery, because with this thing within neurologist and neurosurgeon. But in reality, this is a big change in the way we see medicine nowadays. I mentioned earlier the fact that the people living with the disease are now subject. They're really active part of the team. And if you haven't seen this, go on YouTube and type "From God to Guide." This is a very nice TED talk that Bas Bloom gave. And this is the first part of the video where he's on his ivory tower as God, and he's throwing a prescription to this person. He's actually is one of his patients with Parkinson. He said, "Take levodopa carbidopa. I think this is Parkinson. See you in 6 months." But then in the second part of the video, he says, "No, this is the type of healthcare I want. I'm not God, I'm a guide." And so they sit next to a table. And people who have been in my office know that we don't have enough, like a desk. I sit next to them if I sit. And so this is really something that has changed the way we see and interpret healthcare. And no, these are not just words. We have our own patient advisory board in Toronto. This is one of the things that made me the proudest from my activities in Toronto so far. So we have an advisory board of people with different movement disorders and their care partners sometimes, and sometimes also their children, which is another important part. And we talk about what the priorities of the clinic are supposed to be. They tell us, well, we don't like how your waiting room is arranged. Sometimes we can say, well, look, we cannot help you because this is not up to us. But sometimes they give us ideas. Sometimes they tell us what studies we should do or how we should be running our research trials. So things have changed clearly, not just from the perspective of the relationship with people living with the disease, but also with the new options that I discussed so far. And now people are arguing that there is no longer a phase with oral treatments and then afterwards advanced treatments, but there might be something in between that involves the levodopa infusion under the skin, because the pump that I told you about today is much easier to start. You can stop it, you can try it. So it's much easier. And maybe you need to, and this is still up to debate, you need to try this before you embark on something a bit more invasive like deep brain stimulation or focused ultrasound or levodopa itself. That's true, but there is one important point I want to mention to you guys, because you might go home today thinking, oh, when the time comes, if I need something, I'll go straight to the phospholevodopa. That's fine. And of course, Abby is going to be happy to hear this, and Abby is actually one of the sponsors of this event. But I want you to put things in perspective, because if you get the treatment with phospholevodopa when you're 50, and then 5-6 years later, you decide that this is too much for you to handle, this pump all the time, then you're 60 and you still have a lot of options in front of you. But if you do this when you are much older, you might miss the opportunity to get something that is brain surgery. I'm not saying you need to have it, but when you look at things from this perspective, we need to plan in advance. You might need to think, okay, what if it doesn't work in a few years from now? I might still be eligible for one of the other options that I mentioned so far. But at the end of the day, and this is my last message to you today, and this is the most important, I think. That's why I kept it as a last slide. Whatever treatment for the complicated phases of the disease you have or you're going to have, this is how we should be looking at the problem. Because of the disease progression, the motor condition worsens, unfortunately, but there are many options that we have. And for most part, people have a good quality of life, for most part. And that's because I go back to the resilience I was saying before. People also are creative. It's not just the doctor that gives you medication. Actually, most of the job is on you that go on vacation. Maybe you go on a cruise instead of going on a hike mission, or you invite friends over instead of going to the restaurant, or maybe you work from home instead of going to work every morning. So there is a lot of adaptation that you put in place, and that's how you can have a fulfilling life. But the adaptation at some point fades if you're still struggling with the problems of Parkinson's disease. For example, you get fired at your workplace because you're working from home, but you're not productive enough, or your spouse leaves you, or you lose your friends because you're not going around anymore. So if you do some of these advanced options that I mentioned so far at this point, you're going to have a better motor control for sure. You are not having off times. You can sleep better at night, no dyskinesias, but you're not going to get your job back, right? You are not. It will be very difficult for you to have your spouse back. And your friends. So the job of the neurologist, and that's why it's really a team effort, is to really understand at what level in your adaptation curve you are, because my job is to tell you, look, it's time to do this, because if you do this at this point, yes, you're going to have a better motor control, but you can go back on track and keep on working, going out, be surrounded by friends, and so forth. And this is why I spend a lot of time when I'm with my patients talking about what they do on a day-to-day basis. Thankfully, I work with a lot of fellows that take care of the medication, the scale, so that boring stuff that the doctor needs to do. But my questions are usually, hey, how are you doing at home? Are you having fun? Because if the answer is no, I always ask myself, okay, is this something related to Parkinson's? Because people might not have fun because they don't like that Trump is going to win the election, for example. And Duodopa is not going to help you there, right? But people might not be happy because of fluctuations of Parkinson's. And then if the answer is yes to that, then I know that I can step in and offer something a bit more. So I don't know if you have time for questions, but really thank you a lot, and apologies about the computer drama. And I think we have 15 minutes late at this point. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Fasano. Will you stay up and answer
Of course,
a few
yeah.
questions for a few
Of course,
minutes?
of course. Yeah, and I'll be around if needed. So.
Amazing.
Any question? I think I know.
I'm running to you with a mic right now.
So thank you for addressing the issue of adaptive DBS. That was one of the things I wanted to bring up with you today. There was an interesting article that was recently published about it, and it shows great promise in terms of how I read it. But I guess a couple of questions I have is, one of the things the article suggests is that it's going to be very timely, or it's going to be quite some time before it becomes widely available. And I guess that's because of the extra time for programming and all the individualized, work that has to be done with the patient. What do you think that timeline looks like, first of all? And second of all, for somebody who already has had the traditional DBS, could they qualify for this in the future with the same hardware that's already been embedded?
Great question. And the other day I was talking about it, last night actually, about the fact that you guys have the advantage of the English, because a lot of patients in the world don't understand English, and literature, scientific literature, is in English. So what you just did, going online, finding a paper, is exactly what everybody should be doing. And at the same time, you're asking, because obviously you're not a doctor, a few things might be complicated. So absolutely great question. So let me answer the first one. I guess there are two parts. But anyways, the first thing is that it's true. At the moment, it's going to be very complicated to program these devices because we haven't done it yet. So far, I have like 7, 8 patients with this device, and I'm learning day by day. But in the future, it's going to be way different. Also because it will become more of like a sort of a black box where it's a sort of a plug and play kind of thing, that we turn the adaptive mode on and everything will be figured out automatically by the device. Yesterday I was in a meeting and one of the presenters said, well, at the moment we are more of a plug and pray kind of thing instead of and it's true. But the good news is that this is happening. It's coming. Because it's been filed at the FDA. So probably it's going to be approved in the States this year. Or early next year, and then usually it takes a year for Canada to have it. So it's not going to take too long. And to your last point, there is this concept in technology that is upgrading the software. So a lot of the people that have DBS right now in Canada, they already have the adaptive feature in their system, but it's locked. until there is an approval from Health Canada. So it will be just a matter of unlocking the feature and they will have it. And for people that don't have that, they will just change the battery because the electrode don't have to be different. Now, this is not going to be work for every person because some people maybe have a very old model or a different type of company. But this is to say that a lot is going to happen and we'll learn day by day and things will be easier in the end. Anything else?
Yes, I noticed that you never mentioned anything about Neopro patches. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I didn't mention about Neupro patch because it's not one of the newest things we have. Neupro has been around for 10 years now. It is a dopamine agonist, so we are not into the device-aided treatments. It is a drug that is given through the skin, and it's a good dopamine agonist because, as you know, dopamine agonists like pramipexole or Mirapex or ropinirole or Requip, these drugs tend to cause behavioral problems like gambling, shopping. Okay. The patch seems to be a bit safer in that regard. It's a softer, more gentle type of dopamine agonist, which is pretty good for restless leg syndrome, pain, because it's a 24-hour treatment. The problem with the patch is that it's not as strong as levodopa, so you can't really function too much on the pump, on the patch alone. You will still need to be on levodopa. Anything else? We're done?
We don't have anything. Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyways, I'll be around for additional question, and thanks for the invitation and also for the flower. You know, I don't get to receive flowers that often. Thank you.